Welcome to the City Rooster Forum. Glad to have you here. I'm Ken Kasner, aka Kenny the Rooster. And today we're going to talk about scams, how scams work, and why people allow them. Okay. Scams are psychological. Okay. Psychological scams, that's the key phrase. Scams come in all forms. Now, previously I did a video about telemarketers because telemarketing has become a big industry. Most of it, 95% of it or more, is not honest. But basically, all scams are not honest. They're not honest because people pull scams in order to try to get things they know they shouldn't have from people they know shouldn't give it to them for whatever reason. Okay, so we have lots of scams. We have the panhandling. Panhandling that people think that I talk about too much whenever I bring it up. Of course, panhandling is a scam in itself, and people don't realize that when strangers come up to you asking you for money for a cup of coffee or a sandwich, they're pulling a scam on you, because no stranger should be going and asking people for money. Okay. But people give it to them anyway because people still don't have enough common sense and insight to understand that you should not give money away to people you don't know just because they tell you a story. People do this because they really believe the story. They really believe the drama that they throw at them. They believe that everything they tell them is true. So they'll doubt or argue with people they know, but they will believe strangers. Money, 99.99999% of the time, never goes to a sandwich or a cup of coffee. What I've done, like, for example, when I used to go to New York City a lot, is I used to be approached by scammers, that otherwise known as panhandlers, asking me for money. And I say, what do you need it for? They would tell me a whole story about things that have happened to them. And then I say, so what do you need that you think me giving you money is going to solve? So what happens is that they tell me these things because they think I'll believe it. I say, for example, a sandwich or a cup of coffee. I say, I'll tell you what, Dunkin' Donuts is right over there. Why don't I buy you that sandwich or buy you that cup of coffee? Whenever I've said that, they say, never mind, I'll get it somewhere else. If they need money for a train ticket, I say, well, why don't I buy you that train ticket? And they say, never mind, I'll get the money somewhere else. Of course, they're going to ask for free travel. So if they ask for a train ticket to go somewhere 700 miles away on an Amtrak train, I'm not going to buy them that. But if they want a ticket to go somewhere maybe 2 local train stations away, or maybe they need somebody to pay for them to go on the bus to the next town, I'll do that. That's a good way to feel that you've helped people when you know you're actually doing a favor for them, if you can afford to do a favor for a total stranger that tells you a story. People think that's not important, but it's very important because panhandling is, in essence, the gateway drug to bigger scams. The leftist movement is based on scams. It's based on them telling you stories that you don't check out, excuse me, that you argue about with people who you do know, and you think that they're just being xenophobic, or you think that they're just being racist. Donald Trump has done a lot of wonderful things, but no matter what he's done, the left is always going to try to give him resistance. And part of their resistance is trying to spread propaganda so that people will go against him. Propaganda in itself is a scam. What other kind of scams do we have? We have the mental illness scam. There was a time when mental illness was nothing more than the deformity of a mental condition that was brought on by some physical defect. Now, everybody claims mental illness. Almost 40% of this country is diagnosed with a mental illness. Why? People either plead insanity to get out of being charged to the fullest extent to a law from pulling a crime, or they just don't want to be punished at all. And people use mental illness as an alibi to try to avoid getting punished by anything, for anything. So somebody will, for example, cut somebody's throat, or shoot somebody, or try to kill an ICE officer with their vehicle. And what do they say? Oh, it was a mental illness, if they survive. If the ICE officer is smart enough to defend themselves, which they should and are allowed to do by law, then they lose their lives. And it wasn't worth losing your life just for a cause that you know nothing about. So basically, a lot of people have done a lot of horrible things to other people and committed a lot of violent crimes and say it was mental illness. One of the ways our government has made themselves vulnerable to people making a lot of money collecting checks, disability checks, to people who are mentally ill is by saying, oh, well, let's get a psychiatrist to sign this, and then I am collecting disability. It's easy to see how the government made themselves vulnerable to this. Because when people try to get assistance for things they really need, the first thing the government says to them is, oh, you don't really need this. You just have a psychological disorder that causes you to think you really need this. So the people who really need it are rejected. And the same techniques that the government has used to reject people for services they really need are the same techniques that have backfired on them by scammers who want to lie about their situation. There's been a lot of people who have used scams to try to say that they were this, that they were that. Now, if everybody were telling the truth, and we know it's not even close, we would know that over 50% of the country, 50%, over half the country, has been a victim of abuse. Now, we know that can't be true, but that's the claim. Victimhood has become very rewarding and has won a lot of phony sympathy. So as a result, a lot of people don't see into this. They often see victimhood as a way to collect sympathy from people so that they don't have to take responsibility for their lives. Now, the difference between victims and survivors is simply this. Victims are losers. Survivors are winners. Survivors are people that at one point were victims but wanted to go on with life and wanted to transition their lives to learn how to recover from this so they can go on and have a happy life or the only life they have. Victims that want to stay victims want to live off sympathy and expect their lives to become so great so that, sure, we'll just live off sympathy and have this person say, oh, you poor thing, and that sort of thing. And people who are victims and want to go on being victims and want people to feel sorry for them have no pride. They have no self-respect. And they never do anything to try to help themselves. They just expect it from others. That's one of the reasons why socialism is catching on in this country. I am proud that I'm a survivor. Not everybody has to be a survivor. Some people never had to go through it. They shouldn't have to feel guilty about other people going through it. I've been a survivor of some bad experiences from my family, and I've done very well for myself. I don't feel sorry for myself. I don't play the victimhood game. That's what survivors do. That's why survivors are winners and victims are losers. A lot of times with scammers, people pull scams to pretend that there's something that they're not, or pretend that they went through something that they didn't. They upstage the need to help real victims or survivors. So people who really had something bad happen to them don't get the assistance or help that they need, because a lot of people want to pretend that they had that experience. A lot of times when I've gone through situations or I've made certain mistakes, I learn from it. So, for example, I watch TV and I see these gold diggers that go on there and talked about being victims and saying this happened to me and this happened to them. I know who was a victim and who wasn't. I can tell just by listening to them talk, just by what they say. Phony victims don't really sound like anything happened to them at all. Real victims sound like not only did something happen to them, but they want to recover from it and become a survivor. And that's what happens. So victimhood is another type of scam. What's even another type of scam is trying to raise money. People think that when you raise money by doing something phony, that you're actually raising money for real, that it's legitimate, but you're actually only pulling a scam. One example is Google Flyers. Google Flyers, which I may talk about in another video, are flyers where somebody basically made up a flyer, took pictures out of the Google library or any other internet library, and they put it together for that missing dog, that missing cat, missing child. But yet, that dog, that cat, that child didn't exist except as a picture on Google. And they weren't really missing. People collect money from them. They say, oh, I'll do anything to help recover that child. I'll do anything to help recover that dog. They're so precious. And here's my name. Here's my number. Here's my information. Here's some money so that you can go take care of it more. They got you. Another type of scam. Lots of scams. Scams that really, really bring down this country. There are people that really believe that all these scams are true. They believe that mental illness, outside of 90%, is real. They believe it's all real. They believe that people are mentally ill. They think that Trump derangement syndrome is a mental illness. It's not. Trump derangement syndrome is drama. And that's another type of scam. Drama. When we spread around drama to try to captivate people, we're pulling a scam. We're telling them something that is not true. People have a lust for drama nowadays because we have no more entertainment. We have no more sports. We have no more type of TV shows with good acting. The reason why Hollywood is all on the left is because Hollywood is drama. Hollywood is entertainment. All these people do is act. There's no such thing as a good scam. All scams are bad. Now, a lot of times we think that George Soros fed all this money into these bad attorneys. We think that all of that is George Soros. And while some of that is true, George Soros has done a lot of damage to this country. Not all the money that goes into all these scams is from him. Some of it comes from us. People that want to give money away to strangers or give into these scams or give into these Google flyers are actually chipping in for phony fundraisers, scams. And the money that's collected is used for a lot of these paid agitators. Paid agitators. What is a paid agitator? Somebody that just gets $1 an hour for going out and trying to start trouble for a movement they know nothing about. Robin Good was a perfect example. It was a very shame that she died. It's especially a shame because she was an American, but she tried to kill a cop and the cop shot her in self-defense. And there was plenty of video and evidence to show for it. But a lot of people didn't want to look at that. They just wanted to follow the drama, the propaganda. A lot of times people get killed and injured from all of these scams and all this drama and all this trouble that isn't even necessary. But a lot of adversarial countries love it because they see a lot of Americans getting killed or falling for this. Right now, the Americans have the biggest weakness in drama, in scams. We're a divided country because of this drama, because of these scams. The Russian hoax was a scam. A Russian hoax was $14 million. $14 million went into the Russian hoax investigation. And they got nothing out of it. But it was a nice scam to try to attempt to make a character assassination on one man who will be retiring after he is no longer president. He could be down in Mar-a-Lago right now, swinging a few golf clubs, being with his family, his grandchildren, but this is what he's giving up his retirement for because he cares so much about his country. So this is what's happening, and this is what these scams are all about. Scams are all about trying to ruin other people's lives. And people that give into these scams, that participate in these scams, that give money away to strangers, that don't try to follow up and use common sense, are actually helping the problem to become bigger. They don't realize that the problem is going to become bigger because of them. They're not on the right side of history. But then if anybody argues with them or calls them out, they'll say, prove it to me. Show me the source. Well, it's not anybody's business to show the source to somebody just because they make a counterclaim. When I went on Facebook the other day and I was arguing with somebody about ICE, and I said ICE is our law enforcement. They're here to protect us. We need them. But they compared them with the Gestapo just because of the propaganda. And then they told me, show me the source. Where's your source? Well, that's not their business to go asking me where the source is. They could just use some common sense and realize that they're going to need protection. They're going to need safety. They're comparing their family that were immigrants with these illegal aliens that are coming over here committing crimes. People are trying to misconstrue and twist the Constitution and compare illegal aliens that are criminals with their family. And they don't know the difference because they have been so captivated by this drama. Now, the reason why people are captivated by this drama is because we no longer have sports. Much of it has been rigged. We no longer have entertainment. A lot of these actors have put out really, really bad films, whether they're apolitical or not. And people that say, oh, well, I don't want to discuss politics, they don't know what they're talking about. They just don't want to admit that they are political and they are just not worried about their country. So scams are one of the biggest drivers in the deformity of this country. And if we don't turn it around, then there's a very good chance by 2100, I won't be alive then, the U.S. will not be a constitutional republic. Unless we can turn it around, unless we can get Americans to try to understand scams and propaganda and drama, which are also scams. Propaganda is a scam. Drama is a scam. Drama is not entertainment. It's not something you see on TV anymore. You don't see a lot of people watching a lot of things on TV, unless it's garbage. You see videos that are being put out there to try to make people think that abuse is more widespread than it really is. But all it is just footage put together by organized actors to try to make people think that abuse is a bigger problem than it really is. If we want to know how much of a problem something really is, if we want to know how much of a problem rape really is, and by the way, rape is an act of violence, it's not an act of sex. If we want to know how much of a problem child abuse is, if we want to know how much of a problem that spousal abuse or any type of abuse is, we have to stop putting on all these lies and pretending to be victims and making up all this stuff so that we can get to the root of the real problems and we can deal with these problems like we used to. It seems we can't do that anymore. Now, one of the things I've always learned is that people need to ask questions. They need to check it out. They shouldn't just ask stupid questions. They should ask legitimate questions. Most certainly questions that begin with the word why. Now, anyway, this is the problem with scams, and we need to address it all. I'm the City Rooster. Like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We're always happy to have you tune in, and we look forward to your comments below each video.